Hey guys, how are you today? Today we're going to talk about evolution. This is the second video I'm making in the inheritance and environment topic for IMAT Biology. Let's get right into it. First of all, we're going to talk about genetic variation. Actually, genetic variation is an issue we have talked in the past about. If you remember, in meiosis, we saw all the ways of how genetic variation is accomplished in sexual reproduction. Okay, how it produces genetic variation among the individuals in a population. But let me remind you one more time how it is caused, by what it is caused. First of all, independent assortment of chromosomes and therefore alleles during meiosis. Crossing over between organisms within a species, random mating between organisms within a species, random fertilization of gametes, and last but not least, mutation. Now, the first four of these processes reshuffle existing alleles in population. Offspring have combinations of alleles which differ from those of their parents and from each other. These genetic variations produces phenotypic variation. Mutation, however, does not reshuffle alleles that are already present. Mutation can produce completely new alleles. This may happen, for example, if a mistake occurs in DNA replication, so that a new base sequence occurs in a gene. This is probably how the sickle cell allele of the gene for the production of the beta-globin polypeptide first arose. Such a change in a gene, which is quite unpredictable, is called a gene mutation, and we've talked about it in my past video. The new allele is very often recessive, so it frequently does not show up in the population until some generations after the mutation actually occurred, when by chance two descendants of organisms in which the mutation happened mate and produce offspring. Okay. Genetic variation, whether caused by the reshuffling of alleles during meiosis and sexual reproduction, or by the introduction of new alleles by mutation, can be passed on by parents to their offspring, giving differences in phenotype. Genetic variation provides the raw material on which natural selection can act. Variation within a population means that some individuals have features that give them an advantage, or as it is called an evolutionary advantage, over other members of that population. Variation in phenotype is also caused by the environment in which organisms live. For example, some organisms might be taller than others because they had access to better quality food where they were growing. Variation caused by the environment is not passed on by parents to their offspring, and as we will see later, this is a mistake of one theory, Lamarck's theory. But now let's see discontinuous and continuous variation. First of all, let's imagine two organisms, you and your friend. You have differences, okay? And these are phenotypic differences because there are differences on the phenotype. It's difference you can see. We have not studied your genes to see this difference. We're looking at them. Therefore, we're talking about phenotypic differences. So these include qualitative differences and quantitative differences. The qualitative differences fall into clearly distinguishable categories with no intermediates. For example, you have one of four possible ABO group, A, B, AB, or O. This is called discontinuous variation. In contrast, the quantitative differences between your individual heights or masses may be small and difficult to distinguish. When the heights of a large number of people are measured, there are no distinguishable height classes. Instead, there is a range of heights between two extremes. This is continuous variation. Both qualitative and quantitative differences in phenotype may be inherited. Both may involve several different genes. However, there are important differences between them. In discontinuous qualitative variation, we have different alleles at a single gene locus have larger effects on the phenotype, while different genes have quite different effects on the phenotype. Now, in continuous or quantitative variation, different alleles at a single gene locus have small effects on the phenotype. Different genes have the same, often additive, effect on the phenotype. A large number of genes may have a combined effect on a particular phenotypic trait. These genes are known as polygens. And now we get into evolution. Evolution is the change in allelic frequencies in a population. But I don't believe by saying that you understand much. In general, evolution or organismic evolution is about changes in populations, species, or group of species. More specifically, evolution occurs because populations vary by the frequency of heritable traits that appear from one generation to the next. These traits are represented by alleles for genes that modify morphology, form or structure, physiology or behavior. Thus, evolution is changes in allele frequencies in populations over time. So, when we're talking about evolution, we are actually talking about the traits and how they have evolved during time. But these traits are controlled by alleles. And this is why evolution is the change in allelic frequencies in populations. Okay, now, I'm sorry. Sometimes populations evolve rapidly, as in the case of the development and spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. However, evolution mostly takes place over hundreds, thousands, or even millions of years. The theory of evolution is supported by scientific evidence from many disciplines. Now I haven't put a slide for that, and I will put, I'm sorry. I want you to know that there are two types of evolution. Okay. Here, we've got two types of evolution. It's called microevolution. Oh my god, I forgot that. Microevolution and macroevolution. I will put a slide in when I upload the file. And macroevolution. Microevolution describes the details of how populations of organisms change from generation to generation and how new species originate. Macroevolution describes patterns of changes in groups of related species over broad periods of geologic time. The patterns determine phylogeny, the evolutionary relationships among species and groups of species. Alright, but now let's see Lamarck's theory of evolution. One of the earliest advocates of evolutionary ideas was Lamarck. His theory included the following three important ideas. First of all, he talked about use and disuse. And he said that parts of the body with increased usage are developed, while unused weaken. This idea is correct because it is commonly observed, like among athletes who train for competitions. Or we can see there are facts that people who are doing mental jobs, I could say, that they're using their mind, it's not that much practical jobs, their brain is more evolved, has more pathways inside it, let's say. Okay, it's like you strengthen, you exercise a part of your body more, and therefore this becomes stronger. Then he talked about inheritance of acquired characteristics, and he described how body features acquired during the lifetime of an organism could be passed on to the offspring. We know that this isn't correct. Only genetic material passes. So if this muscle bulk is, which is not, is, no, let's say that this muscle bulk was linked with some genes, then yes, it would be passed to offspring. But it is not linked with any genes, and it is only because of the practice you're doing to your muscles, and therefore it could not be passed to the offspring. And then he talked about natural transformation of species, and he described how organisms produce offspring with changes, transforming its subsequent generation into slightly different from toward some ultimate higher order of complexity. This idea was also incorrect, because species did not become extinct, nor did they split and change into two or more species. Alright, and then, 50 years after Lamarck published his idea, Darwin published The Origin of Species. Darwin's theory that natural selection, or surviving of the fittest, was the driving force of evolution is now called Darwinism. Later, genetics was incorporated into evolutionary thinking, creating a new, more comprehensive view of evolution, now variously called neo-Darwinism, the synthetic theory of evolution, or the modern synthesis. There is abundant evidence that evolution occurs, that some species change over time, that other species diverge and become one or more new species, and that still other species become extinct. The question that evolutionists try to answer is how evolution occurs. For this, they propose theory. Lamarck theorized, incorrectly, that evolution occurs through the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Darwin's theory was that evolution progresses through natural selection. The synthetic theory of evolution combines natural selection with the influence of genetics. These theories, together with others, proposed mechanisms responsible for the evolutionary patterns unequivocally observed in nature. This was here. And now we're going to see some evidence for evolution, which is provided by the following scientific disciplines. First of all, paleontology. Paleontology provides fossils that reveal the prehistoric existence of extinct species. As a result, changes in species and the formation of new species can be studied. Fossil deposits are often found among sediment layers, where the deepest fossils represent the oldest specimens. For example, fossil oysters removed from successive layers of sediment show gradual changes in the size of the oyster shell, alternating with rapid changes in shell size. Large, rapid changes produce new species. The fossil records, as we said, what does it do? It reveals the existence of species that have become extinct or have evolved into other species. Now, radiometric dating and half-life accurately measure the age of fossils. Prokaryotes were the first organisms to develop on Earth, and they are the oldest fossils. Paleontologists have discovered many transitional forms that link older fossils to modern species, such as the transition of Eohippus to the modern horse, Equus. Archaeopteryx is a fossil that links reptiles and birds. The fossil record also indicates that all the organisms alive today are only a tiny fraction of the organisms that ever lived. In other words, most life that existed on Earth went extinct. Then we've got biogeography. It uses geography to describe the distribution of species. This information has revealed that unrelated species in different regions of the world look alike when found in similar environments. This provides strong evidence for the role of the natural selection in evolution. Now, according to the theory of plate tectonics, continents and oceans rest on giant plates of the Earth's crust that flow on top of the hot mantle. Convection currents in the mantle are responsible for the slow, continuous movement of the plates known as continental drift. For example, the North America plate drifts northwestward while it pulls away from the Eurasian plate at a rate about 2 centimeters per year. Continental drift causes mountains to form as plates collide. About 45 million years ago, the Indian plate collided with and sank beneath the Eurasian plate, forcing it upwards and forming the Himalayan mountains. Continental drift has changed the distributions of life on Earth. One example is the fact that marsupials are located almost exclusively in Australia, while other continents are home to eutherians, the true placental mammals. Fossil evidence suggests that marsupials originated in what is now Asia and reached Australia via South America and Antarctica, while the continents were still joined. When the continents broke apart and moved to different climates, Australia was set afloat like a giant raft, carrying both marsupials and eutherians. In Australia, the marsupials diversified, filling every available niche, that's called adaptive radiation, while the true placental mammals, which were not adapted to the Australian environment and climate, went extinct. On other continents, the opposite occurred. Only the true placental mammals survived and diversified, while marsupials went extinct. And this is an example of natural selection, the survival of the fittest. Okay, let's move on with comparative embryology. Embryology reveals similar stages in development, as it is called ontogeny, among related species. The similarities help establish evolutionary relationships, phylogeny. Now, gill slits and tails are found in fish, chicken, pig, and human embryos. And then we've got comparative anatomy. The study of different structure contributes to science understanding of the evolution of anatomical structure and of evolutionary relationships. Let me show you this one. The wing of a bat, the lateral fin of a whale, and the human arm all have the same internal bone structure, although the function of each varies. These structures, known as homologous structures, have a common origin and reflect a common ancestry. So what are homologous structures? Body parts that resemble one another in different species because they have evolved from a common ancestor. Because anatomy may be modified for survival in specific environments, homologous structures may look different, but will resemble one another in pattern, how they're put together. And then we've got analogous structures, which are body parts that resemble one another in different species, but not because they have evolved from a common ancestor, but because they evolved independently as adaptations to their environment. For instance, the fins and body shapes of sharks, penguins, and porpoises are analogous because they are adaptations to swimming. Now, last but not least, we've got we've got comparative biochemistry. I almost forgot that. Organisms that have a common ancestor will have common biochemical pathways. The more closely related the organisms are to each other, the more similar the biochemistry is. Humans and mice are both mammals. This close relationship is the reason that medical researchers can test new medicines on mice and extrapolate the results to humans. And last but not least, we've got molecular biology. It examines the nucleotide and amino acid sequences of DNA and proteins from different species. Closely related species share higher percentages of sequences than species distantly related. In addition, all living things share the same genetic code. This data strongly favors evolution of different species through modification of ancestral genetic information. For instance, more than 98% of the nucleotide sequence in humans and chimpanzees are identical. But what I want you to remember is cytochrome C. You remember it? Since all aerobic organisms contain cells that carry out aerobic cell respiration, they all contain the polypeptide cytochrome C. A comparison of the amino acid sequence of the cytochrome C among different organisms shows which organisms are most closely related. The cytochrome C in human cells is almost identical to that of our closely relatives, the chimpanzee and gorilla, but differs from that of a pig. And this is how I end the part 2 video. I made an introduction to evolution, and we talked about evidence for evolution. Next, in the next video, we're going to see some historical context for evolutionary theory, Darwin's theory of natural selection, types of selection, and some patterns of evolution and modern theory of evolution. And that's all. I'm not sure whether we're going to have a part 3 and part 4 video. We're going to have a part 3 video, but I'm not sure whether I will make a part 4. I don't know. I'm trying to split videos into much smaller ones to help you and be more flexible with your studying. For instance, you might just stop it here and go to the next video whenever you're ready, because I have some complaints because some videos are big, like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, even 50 minutes. And it's not very flexible with your studying. So I decided to create smaller videos to help you with your studying. Thank you so much. Bye bye, guys.